Hey, Mr. Watson here, and in this video we are going to look at personality and its relationship to performance in sport. Okay, so we're looking to find out whether personality can affect sport performance and if sport can actually affect personality. So, personality. It's important that we start with a definition, and for this video we're going to focus on this definition: the sum of characteristics that make a person unique. Now, it's also important to understand there are many definitions of personality due to the number of people that have researched this area. Okay, but let's move on to sport and start quite general. And I think it's easy to say that in sport, a lot of athletes have different personalities. So if you look at football, Lionel Messi, for example, he appears to be more shy and introverted, where Ronaldo's more proud and boastful. Stephen Curry appears to be fun, easygoing, quite laid back. LeBron James, slightly more serious and focused. Khabib is religiously grounded and quite humble. Conor McGregor is, again, boastful, cocky, confident are some of the words that you could relatively say describe him. Okay, so what is important to note that all of these athletes still compete at the elite level. So we'll look into that. Despite having differences, they're still at the elite level. So we'll come on to how that can happen later in the video. Now, for Cambridge, we need to look at three perspectives. Okay, so the first one we're going to start with are trait perspectives. So trait meaning characteristics, okay? And this perspective suggests that these characteristics are inherited from our parents. So therefore, personality is fixed, consistent, and predictable. So you can predict someone's personality, okay? Or you can predict what they are likely to choose to do because of their personality. So this started with, or what we have to look at are two perspectives or particular theories, okay? And we have the narrow band approach and personality types. But keeping it quite general, what trait perspectives are suggesting is that people who are more extroverted tend to play team sports, or some studies have said that these will play sports anyway, and they have stable emotions. Some studies have started to say, depending on particular characteristics, will lead you to a specific sport. Fighters being aggressive and have more tolerance to pain in comparison to a golfer. Okay, so as you can see that these studies are saying, oh, they'll take a personality test and they're saying you would do well in contact sports, you would do well in team sports, you would do well in individual. So they're saying everything is fixed, it's inherited, and that you can kind of look at these things on a continuum. Okay, so let's start with the narrow band approach from Giordano. Okay, and what he said was, we have two types of personality. Type A, someone who is impatient, intolerant, so they're not likely to accept mistakes in training, and they have high levels of stress. They're very stressful, they become anxious, which we'll talk about in a moment. And on the other side, we have type B, who tend to be relaxed, tolerant, and have lower levels of stress. Now, if I was to say to you now, I'm sure you could think of someone in your family, in your school, in your sports teams, and you could say they're type A or type B. So one of the benefits of this approach was it was quite simple to understand. We have two types of personality. Now, another distinction between these personalities was anxiety. Now, this approach suggested that those who are type A have higher anxiety, those who are type B have lower anxiety. Now, this anxiety that's on the screen is trait anxiety. So this is anxiety that is inherited, that is fixed. So type A, they're always anxious. They're never really not stressed. They're not as calm. They're anxious about most things. Okay, it's quite constant. And on the other hand, type B, they have lower levels of anxiety. However, something that we'll come into, and it's important to know if someone is anxious, is something called state anxiety. And sorry, I should say anxiety, in case we've forgotten, is a negative emotion. Okay, it's experiencing apprehension and being aware of high arousal that link to fears and worries. Okay, but we do have state anxiety, and that is anxiety in a particular situation. Okay, for example, taking a penalty in football. So that would bring anxious just in the moment. Or if you think about when exam week comes up, so you might not be an anxious person, but exam week will bring about a situational anxiety. But this will come up in one of the criticisms of this perspective, this approach. So we'll talk about that in a moment. So just to summarize here, narrow band approach, two types of personalities, type A, type B. And there's lots of other characteristics that you could list under these. Okay. We then have personality types. So we'll start with Isaac. And basically, he said that we have stable and unstable personality traits. And these unstable emotions can be known as neurotic, neurotic behavior. There's also an extroverted personality and introverted. Now, I also already mentioned that with Lionel Messi and Ronaldo. So this picked up a lot more traction in research because it wasn't just saying there's two types of personality, because a lot of people thought that was fairly simplistic. But here we had 4 quadrants, so you could either be extroverted and unstable, extroverted and stable, which they said was the ideal for team sports, introverted and stable, or introverted and unstable. So they categorized this into 4. So a lot of people looked into this. So let's just explaining this. This suggests that stable personality traits are ones that are unchangeable and remain constant and predictable. For example, a stable trait might be calmness. People might be calm in most situations, or for others, they might be highly anxious in most situations. An unstable personality trait is one that you can change. Okay, so if we look at aggression, now everyone has aggression built into them. However, the level of aggression might vary from time to time. Okay, and like I said, if someone shows unstable emotional characteristics, it's often referred to as neurotic behavior. Okay, and with extroversion, introversion, some people have a degree of both, but they might be more dominant on one side, or someone might be way over on the scale. And like I've said, team players tend to be more anxious and extroverted, and they could lack the imagination for individual sports. Okay, however, this should be viewed with caution, and I will mention we'll go over some examples in the limitations to this, and I'm sure you're already thinking of examples yourself which go against this theory. However, again, this theory got limited as being too simplistic. Despite having the 4 quadrants, they still thought it was too simplistic. Okay, so we then had Cattell, and he constructed this questionnaire of 16 personality factors, and this again picked up a lot more credibility because he said there's 16 of these factors, and this questionnaire started being used in sport, and research on this profiles, Cattell himself was starting to say that there was differences in personalities between contact sports, such as martial artists. Like I've said, they tend to be more brave, more pain tolerant, etc. in comparison to those doing individual team sports or individual sports of a different nature. However, again, there are flaws in this research. One criticism of this was that athletes were giving particular answers to the questionnaire at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in compared to 9 o'clock the following morning. So there were criticisms on that, and basically it came about with that personality tests such as this one does not link you to a specific sport, because there are a lot more variables that come into play, which we'll talk about. Okay, so there we have Eysenck and Cattell, who moved a bit further on than the narrow approach, but still they were criticised for it only being characteristic traits that were inherited, and a lot of people started to say that these were changeable depending on situations. It does not take into account the environment. So if we look at this, so in reality, behavior is not always predictable. It does not account for the fact that people change their behavior in response to a certain situation. There are also many different variables that exist that affect sport choice and achievement.
Beneficial than others for athletic success. For example, the traits of mental toughness and discipline, which both Ronaldo and Messi share, are relatively more beneficial than how social you are for becoming a high-level athlete. And this brings us to the second question, which is, are there any personality tests that can predict athletic performance? No scientific study has shown a strong relationship between personality variables and athletic ability. As mentioned earlier, although we do see differences in personality between elite-level athletes and beginners, we do not see consistent differences in personality between athletes of similar skill levels. So we cannot predict that one athlete on a team will be better than another based on a personality test. In support of this, researchers were unable to distinguish between starters and non-starters in a high school basketball team with personality tests. This highlights the important point that it would be unwise to make decisions on who to pick for a team or who to play versus who to leave on the bench based on personality tests. The reality is that there are several factors that influence performance, and some, such as the athlete's physical and motor ability, are more important than personality traits for athletic success. Another reason why personality tests cannot predict performance is because an athlete's performance in a given situation may not reflect his personality. For example, imagine the following situation. An elite-level basketball player is sent to the foul line to shoot 2 free throws with his team trailing by 1 point in a playoff game, and there is no time left on the clock. The athlete shooting may have a disposition to be low in anxiety, but it is unlikely that anyone could approach this situation without feeling at least a little anxious. In this situation, an athlete that normally scores 90% of his shots may feel overwhelmed by the pressure and miss one or both shots. It is also possible that an athlete who is relatively higher in dispositional anxiety and normally scores 80% of his shots is able to use strategies to help himself relax and perform under the pressure. Essentially,
so what this is saying here is that an athlete who has higher trait anxiety, so let's just say their characteristics, they know they're anxious, they're constantly anxious, they might deal better with a more pressured situation because they have strategies with how to cope with their anxiety, the state anxiety in a particular situation. And it gave the example of LeBron James, someone who might be or lower in anxiety, but in that moment, it's uncommon to just not feel anything, in that importance of a game. Okay, and it also gave Usain Bolt. So if we're going on the trait perspective, he should be an introvert. Okay, because he's in an individual sport. However, he's probably one of the most extroverted athletes on the planet. Okay, but is in an individual sport. We look at team sports. I always like to use James Milner. He's very focused, and he's very good, high concentration, but plays a team game. But he'd happily go home and dip his plain rich tea biscuits in a cup of tea. Okay, doesn't like the limelight. So you do have examples that don't go with the trait theories and perspectives, and this has led to the criticisms. And this took us on to social learning perspectives. Now, you might remember this from ASPE, observational learning, so learning from important others or others around you. So this is why there is a lot of pressure on national governing bodies to promote athletes that are clean, athletes that are respectful. They don't discuss religion, race, which is all big in the news. They're just very respectful, and it's important that these get promoted because of the social learning theory. But this theory says that a person's personality changes with the situation, and that the environment, including the behavior of other people, influences behavior. So this doesn't acknowledge someone's inherited traits and characteristics. So it's kind of the polar opposite perspective. Okay, so if we're just looking now, you'll see, and sure, we see the Ronaldo celebration, and people are watching how performers act, and it's probably important to act yourself and true to yourself as how you are. So people are going to look, and you see unsportsmanlike behavior or cockiness is sometimes not always respected by teammates or what young children want to see. However, good role models do make an impact on the behavior of others, but I'd suggest being yourself and being humble is a good one. Okay, but this is why getting it right in who you promote and adopt the personality of a role model is correct. But again, this also has criticisms because it doesn't take into account someone's characteristics, their inherited ones, and also that if people are modeling their behavior and their personality on a role model, they might not be being true to themselves. And I'm sure you can think of an example where you've kind of put on a little acting performance and pretending you're confident when you're really anxious, and that in some aspects that's completely fine, so it helped you deal with the situation. But it's more focused on if you're disrespecting others because you've seen that on the TV and you know that's not your true self. It's probably not good to adopt the personality of that type of role model. Okay, so that's just a quick one on the social learning, and the particular name here would be Bandura, who's going to come up a lot in this unit. Okay, so that moves us on to the interactionist approach. Now, many sports psychologists feel that both the trait approach and the social learning approach have some value. So we are all born with certain personality characteristics, but some of them can be changed by interacting with the environment. So this has resulted in this interactionist approach. Okay, so this agrees that we do have traits and they appear consistently, but on many other occasions when we interact with the environment or a situation or influential others, it can affect our personality and behavior. So common example of this is a tennis player who's shy off the court, and then when they're in the game, they're loud, they're brash, they're aggressive. Okay. Now we had Lewin, who put forward this into an equation. So as you'll see there, we have B equals F in brackets PE. So what that means is our behavior is the product of the function. It's easier to think, in my opinion, the product of our personality and environment. So this, you can use this in the exam when talking about the interactionist approach using this equation. Okay, and some research was done by Hollander's model. Okay, and what this suggests is that we have this inner physical core which is not affected by the environment. Okay, it's where we have these permanent qualities such as our basic beliefs, our values. Okay, and this again could be religion. So your inner core and this affects the next layer. So this next layer is the way we typically or usually respond to certain situations. Now this is where the environment comes in. Okay, so an outer layer reveals that our role-related behaviors can affect our responses. So therefore, our behavior can be completely different at different times. And the social environment affects that role-related. So a classic example of this, and I mentioned at the start of the video, was Habib. So Habib, who is religiously grounded, very humble, and he is like that 99% of the time. Very respectful guy. But due to the role Conor McGregor was playing and the environment Habib found himself in, after he beat McGregor, he jumped the fence to attack his team. Now, if you watch the interviews after that from Habib, he said that he didn't care about being fined and not getting his fight money. He cared about what his father thought, okay, about he's acted in an unheard of way, okay? So that's just the way that the social environment can affect that inner core, but 99% of the time, Habib is true to that person he really is, okay? So this is the interactionist approach. It's a combination of our characteristics, our traits, and how the social environment can affect our role-related behaviors. Now, in conclusion, what we're going to look at is are personality traits changeable, and would doing so even be worth the effort? Now, I would say yes. Now, usually your personality, like I said, is constant. However, research has saying that you can change specific characteristics, ones that are going to help you climb that performance pyramid. So by working on your mental toughness, working on your confidence, working on your adaptability, okay? But what it's suggesting is that there are things at play, like the Messi situation and Ronaldo. They share mental toughness, but one's shy, one is not. But really that mental toughness plays the important factor. So it's important that you do work hard at traits that are going to allow you to be successful, but personality alone does not predict sport performance. I think there are much more things at play, like we talked about with Usain Bolt. Genetically, he's just got them fast twitch muscle fibers. His physical performance is great, and that's why he can be an extrovert. He's not linked to that introvert state. Okay, so this is personality, and we're just going to finish with a little video here.
No matter where you come from, what you have or don't have, what you lack, what you have too much of, but all you need to have is faith in God, an undying passion for what you do or what you choose to do in this life, and a relentless drive and the will to do whatever it takes to be successful and whatever you put your mind to. Make sure you live in the moment and work your butt off every single day. And I hope I inspire people all around the world to just be themselves, be humble, and be grateful for all the blessings in your life. And I'm truly honored to be your MVP this year. So thank you very much.
Okay, so what Stephen Curry sort of said there, he is religious, he believes in God, but he's true to himself. And what he's saying is if you hold them in a cause and work on some of the characteristics that are proven to help you improve performance, that is the approach to do. So not modeling behavior such as Balotelli and things that might be cool and get likes on social media, but taking the time to work on mental toughness, adaptability and discipline towards a sport is going to benefit. Okay, and that is the end of personality. Thank you.